Do you want to keep using Google services? Well, get ready, because there is a big shift happening when it comes to tracking user data. With an increasing emphasis on user privacy and data protection laws worldwide, it's no wonder why Google has decided to enforce stricter data protection rules with the implementation of consent mode. So what exactly is consent mode? Well, this Google feature enables advertisers to respect users' privacy by modifying how ads and analytics behave based on users' consent to cookies. But let's take a step back. I'm sure we've all heard of cookies at some point or another, but what actually are they? A cookie is a small file of information that a web server generates and sends to a web browser. As Cloudflare puts it, web browsers store the cookies they receive for a predetermined period of time or for the length of a user's session on a website. They attach the relevant cookies to any further future requests the user makes of the web server. Cookies are used by the vast majority of websites, and they can do a number of things. For example, remembering your preferences, recording what you have put into your shopping basket, or even count the number of people who are looking at a website. I think it's safe to assume that all of us at one time or another have come across a cookies banner. But for those who don't really get what they are, these are essentially a consent pop-up that seeks visitor permission for cookie usage. These consent banners typically give you the option to accept or deny the use of cookies, with some offering more advanced options to let you adjust what information is gathered while using a site. You'll also normally find a link to the website or company's privacy policy or cookies policy here, and this will provide the user with information on what data is being gathered and how it is collected and used. Okay, so now that we understand what cookies are, let's get back to consent mode. Consent mode is a new feature that Google has come out with that allows businesses to adjust how their Google tags behave based on the consent status of their users. It's Google's response to the growing popularity of transparent data collection practices that align with global privacy regulations such as the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, and the California Consumer Privacy Act, or the CCPA. This feature allows Google tags to understand and respect the consent choices made by users through a website's cookie consent banner. When a user opts out of cookies that track personal data for advertising purposes, consent mode ensures that the corresponding Google tags, which include those from Google Ads, Google Analytics, and Floodlight, will adjust their data processing in real time. So now, instead of losing all tracking capabilities when a user opts out, Google Consent Mode enables the use of aggregated and anonymized data, ensuring that businesses can still gain insights into user behavior and ad performance without infringing on individual privacy rights. With the big changes to data collections and user privacy that Google are making, consent mode won't continue to be an optional add-on, but an essential part of any Google Ads strategy so that the essential data needed to optimize a campaign isn't lost. Here are the 3 important features of the Google Consent Mode. User consent adaptability. Consent mode automatically adjusts the behavior of Google services depending on whether consent has been granted by the user. For example, if a user does not consent to cookies, Google will not use cookies for advertising or analytics. Conversion modeling. Even when cookies are not used due to lack of consent, Google Ads conversion modeling can infer conversions by observing the ad interactions of users who have given their consent. This allows businesses to measure the effectiveness of their ads without compromising on privacy. And supporting regulatory compliance. By enabling consent mode, businesses can ensure that their use of Google Ads and Google Analytics aligns with the local data protection laws, thereby avoiding potential legal penalties. So how does Google Consent Mode work? Consent mode is essentially made up of 2 key components: ad storage control and analytics storage control. If a user consents to the use of advertising cookies, the ad storage flag is set to granted, allowing tags like Google Ads and Floodlight to store and access cookies for advertising purposes. This includes the deployment of cookies that track conversions, retarget users, and personalize ads according to users' behaviors and preferences. If a user does not give their consent, the ad storage flag is set to denied, preventing these tags from using cookies for ad personalization and retargeting, and also conversion tracking. Consent mode does enable the limited use of certain measurement tools. For example, when ad storage is set to denied, conversion modeling can come into play. This method allows for some performance data to be collected and used in an aggregated form, enabling businesses to make informed decisions without infringing on user privacy. The analytics storage control is tailored to handle a user's consent for analytics cookies. This control influences how Google Analytics and other analytics tools manage cookies and collect data. When consent is provided and analytics storage is set to granted, businesses can collect detailed analytics data, including user interactions and behaviour across their website. On the flip side, if a user opts out, setting the analytics storage to denied, Google Analytics will operate in a restricted mode. In this scenario, the amount of user data collected is significantly reduced. So why do you need consent mode? Well, compliance with privacy law. It helps your business to adhere to stringent data protection regulations. Preservation of data integrity. By respecting the user consent, businesses can maintain trust and transparency with their users. Optimization of ad spend. Even with limited data, consent mode's conversion modeling ensures that ad spend is optimized based on available consented data. Given the amount of infringements on data privacy that can happen to us as users of the internet and how often our data is served to third parties, it's no shock that Google is trying to regulate this, especially in their marketing platform. This isn't a change that's going to be going anywhere anytime soon, so I highly recommend that you look at implementing consent mode within your Google Tag Manager to deploy on your website to help with your advertising streams if you're advertising on Google Ads, and to allow you to use Google Analytics, even if it is in a restricted form. To comply with GDPR, each website will need a cookie banner and a privacy policy or cookies policy that states exactly what users' data is being gathered, how it's being gathered, and how it's being used. It is the business owner or the business's data protection officer's responsibility to ensure that the cookie banner is compliant with GDPR and that their cookie policy and privacy policy is also compliant with GDPR or their local privacy legislation authority. So here's a step-by-step guide on how to set up consent mode for any cookie banner. So step 1 is going to be to confirm that consent mode isn't already set up properly. So in order to do this, we need to log into our Google Tag Manager account and go on the preview. So because I have already got consent mode set up for this website, I will be walking you through as if it isn't. So if you click on window loaded and click over consent, and you can see this message, consent not configured, default consent state has not been set yet. That means that consent mode either isn't set up or it hasn't been set up properly. I've had to click on set so that you can see this message, but if I go and click on my window loaded, because I'd already accepted all cookies, you can see here that it is set up properly. So with that in mind, let's exit out of the preview mode and move on to step 2. So for step number 2, we need to gather some crucial information about the cookie banner you're using. For this website, they're using cookie yes, but this should work for any cookie banner that you're using. So first step is to right click and inspect the page. We want to navigate over to application, which is right here, and then you'll see the storage options here. So now that we're in application, I have clicked down to cookies. This is normally where you're going to find the information you need from the cookie, but sometimes it can also be found in local storage. So I'll go through local storage afterwards. So under cookies, you click on the domain, and then you want to find something that either says cookie or consent or both. So for me, I can see here that it says cookie yes -consent. So I know that my cookie data is stored in here. The first thing that you're going to want to grab is the technology. So under technology, if you found the cookie information under cookies, just put that it's under cookies. If you found it under local storage, you'd put local storage. So first port of call is we've got cookies. Okay, so the next thing you want to grab is the name. So we can see here that the name is cookie yes -consent. So you want to grab that information as well. And then the last thing that you want is the cookie information. So that would be this part here. So we just grab that and pop it in a Word document, in a notes, anything you've got that you can easily refer back to. Just to confirm as well, that is the technology, so where it's stored, either in local storage or in cookies. It is the name of the cookie, or if you're in local storage, it would be referred to as the key. And then you want the cookie information. Copy and paste that, put it all together and keep it safe, because we're going to use that to refer back to later on. So we're going to open up Google Tag Manager again and go into tags. As you can see here, I've actually got all of my tags set up, but for the purposes of this video, let's pretend they're not there. You want to create a new tag here. You want to call it something along the lines of consent mode default. For the tag configuration, you need to search for the consent mode brackets Google tags, which you are going to find in the Google tag gallery. So when you're trying to find this tag for the first time, if you haven't used it before, you can see this bar at the top here that says discover more tag types in the community template gallery. You want to click into that, and then you'll see all of these different tag templates, and for this one we'll just search consent mode. So this is the one that you want to see. As you can see, I've already got it added, but this is a GTM template from Simo Ahava. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And then you would just import it here, and then it would appear like this. This is the basis of where someone has come onto your site for the first time and they see the cookie banner. Before you can start gathering any information about them, they need to accept the cookies or deny the cookies. So as a default, we need to have them all as denied. You can't track anything until they've consented to it. So we've got default as a consent command. And then the request for Google services, set the ad storage, the analytics storage, the ad user data, and the ad personalization all to denied. Depending on your location, you can have the other signals, so the personalization storage, functionality storage, and security storage set to granted, but you need to check what your local regulations are to that. For the other settings, you want to tick pass ad click information through URLs, and you want to tick redact ads data. And then this part we'll come back to later. For the triggering, we want the consent initialization set to all pages. Once you've done that, you click save and exit out of it. Okay, so now that we've got our first Google tag, we're going to move on to step 4, which is to set up a new variable called cookie consent. I've got mine set up already, but you would click new, and then you would name it cookie consent. Now for the variable configuration, the variable type is going to be a first party cookie. So you need to select that. And then we come on to the cookie name. Now this is where you're going to need to refer back to your notes from step 2 when we were investigating what the information gathered in the cookie banner is. So if we refer back to it, you can see under cookies, the name for the cookie consent was cookie yes -consent. So that's what I put here. You also want to check this box here for the decode cookie, and then you want to press save. If your cookie data was stored under local storage rather than under cookies, which I can show you back here, if it was found under cookies, that's what the previous variable was for. If it's found under local storage, here's what you need to do. So you would call it cookie consent for the purposes of this one. I'm going to call it local storage. And for the variable configuration, you need to select custom JavaScript. Now for this one, we are going to need to paste some JavaScript code in there, which is going to look like this. Now this section, you're going to have to replace with whatever the key was for your specific cookie banner. So under local storage, it would be whatever is here for the consent. I obviously don't have it in this one, so I can't show you what that looks like, but it would essentially be that under local storage. So once you've done that, you would click save. To make another new variable called lookup ad storage. As you can see, I've got it here, but you would click new and call it lookup ad storage. So here the variable configuration that we're going to use is regex table, which can be found scrolling down slightly on the variable type, and then you can see it here. So that's the one that we would use. So we've already done our variable, which is cookie consent. So what you would need to do, normally you'll see it as click classes, you just need to drop down this list and select cookie consent. So this is again where we need to refer back to the information we gathered in step 2 and have a look at the information stored here. So I can see here that for the ad storage, we can see advertisement is advertisement : yes. So that is what I'm going to put as the pattern. The pattern is advertisement yes. So if a user opts into our cookies, it will say yes to advertising, and then the output of this is going to be granted. So this is essentially going to update when a user opts into the cookie usage via the consent banner. This is going to push through a new layer and update to granted. The default value is denied, as we'd said it previously, and then sometimes you'll find that it will automatically tick full matches only and enable capture groups and replace functionality. The only one in the advanced settings that you want to ensure is ticked is ignore case. And then we click save. Now you're going to want to do the same thing for analytics storage as well. So call it analytics storage, regex table, cookie consent, and then for this one you want to find where analytics is in this. So I can see here analytics is yes. You want to put that in exactly as it is and then set that to granted. Set the default value as denied and ensure that only the ignore case is ticked, and then press save. So now that we've got our variables set up, we need to do a Google tag for the update. So as you can see here, I created a Google tag called consent mode update. You would just create a new tag and call it that. We've already pulled through the consent mode template, so you should be able to just select this from the custom. You should see it appear here. And then the consent command, instead of default, you're going to want to drop that down to update. So the required for Google services, you're then going to put, instead of denied how it was before, you need to scroll down and look up ad storage for the ad storage. For the analytics storage, you're going to want to go back down and find analytics storage because it's specific to that one. And then for the ad user data and ad personalization, these are also both going to want to be ad storage. Again, the other signals will stay the same as they were previously. And then we're going to want to ensure that pass ad click-through information through URLs is clicked and redact ads personal data is also clicked. And then the triggering, again, is going to be consent initialization on all pages. You're going to want to click out of that, preview it and submit it. Okay, so the next step after this, once it's all been submitted, is we need to test it and make sure that it's working properly. So for this, we're going to want to go back into our web browser on the page and inspect it again. We're going to want to go back to applications, and we are going to want to find where the consent is and right click and delete it because we're starting this from scratch again. So now we can preview it. And we can accept all, minimize that. So here, once we click into consent, we can see that on-page default has been set to what we set it to. So that's working fine. And then later, when the page reloaded, when we clicked accept to all cookies on the banner, we can see the update here is granted, which is what we want. So we know that if a user opts into the cookies via the cookie banner, with our setup here, it's working as it should. But now we need to check the reverse of that. We need to make sure that once a user has opted out of all cookies, that they're not being granted anyway. So we'll go back through, we'll inspect, go back to application, go to where the consent was given and delete it. And then we'll exit out of that and preview mode again. Okay, so this time we want to reject all. Minimize this. So let's go over to consent. It was set. Here we can see the defaults. Okay, that's what we should see. That's what we expect to see. And then we can see the current state is denied, which is what we are expecting. The update denied. So now we know that both if a user decides to opt into cookies, it's working successfully. And if a user decides to opt out of cookies, it's also working as we would expect it to. So now that we have it all working properly, it comes onto the last step, which is to navigate back over to the Google Tag Manager account and click on Admin. We then want to click on Container Settings, and you'll see this little bit down here called Additional Settings, and it will say Enable Consent Overview Beta. You're going to want to click that. Now we can go into our tags, and you should see this little symbol here. This is the consent overview symbol. So if we click on that, if you haven't configured your consent tags, they'll all come up here. I've done this for my ones now, but let's click on the consent mode default to show you an example of what it would look like. So we'll see our whole tag configuration here. And then this bit at the bottom was what you might have seen earlier because it was already enabled, but you'll see this here, the consent settings. So you'll see here the built-in consent checks, which are all the things that we would expect it to see. So we don't really need any additional consent checks. It'll automatically be set to not set, but here we can see that no additional consent is required based on the built-in consent checks. So we would just select no additional consent required, or if there is an additional consent required for the Google tag you're looking at, you would need to select that. Click Save. And then you'd want to do that for all of the tags that you have set up. I hope that video helped you understand what consent mode is, how it works, and also how to set it up pretty easily for almost any consent banner. If you did find this video helpful, please remember to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to us for more tips, tricks, how-tos, and advice on all things digital marketing.